My name is Brendon O'Connor. I'm a professor of US politics and US foreign relations. Like many people, I'm a US politics junkie. And this time of every 4 years is, I suppose, our kind of Olympics or Melbourne Cup, where we get to see if our long-standing beliefs about the US hold up and what's the fate of the world going to be for the next 4 years. I have a long-standing interest in US politics. I've written a lot of things about it, but I've got a particular interest, like many people, in Donald Trump. It's often said Donald Trump doesn't read very much, but many of us who are fascinated and quite appalled by him at times spend a lot of time reading about him. And one of the things I've been looking at specifically is this question of, is it useful to call Donald Trump a fascist? So there's a lot of possible words that you might use to describe Donald Trump, maybe a would-be dictator, a demagogue, an authoritarian, a right-wing populist, an autocrat, a racist, a misogynist, or a fantasist. And he probably fits most of those definitions, probably all of those definitions. Lots of people have suggested Donald Trump as a fascist, and I suppose the most dramatic example would be not accepting the 2020 election results and then encouraging his supporters to have a raid on the US Capitol building, an insurrection. Many people would say that not accepting the peaceful handover of power is the sort of core condition for calling Donald Trump a fascist. Some of his people who served for him, General Milley, Mark Esper, General Kelly, they've said, well, Donald Trump wants a degree of loyalty and has at times glorified German generals. And that some people would say, well, that is a clear sign that he's a would-be fascist. But I think the term fascism probably should be reserved as a kind of in extreme cases for those who both advocate and glorify violence by the police, by the military, by their supporters, and carry it out. And if Donald Trump is re-elected, and we're already calling him a fascist now, and then he decides to intern hundreds of thousands potentially of so-called illegal immigrants or refugees in the United States, what do we call him then? So I think in some ways fascism should be reserved for situations of extreme violence targeted against opponents or scapegoated ethnic minorities. And we might at the moment think that Trump is a potential fascist or he's a would-be fascist, but to say someone is a fascist in action, I think probably relies on a degree of violence that we didn't quite see in the first Trump administration and maybe potential for the second Trump administration, but I think that is to some degree speculation rather than known reality. One of the things about researching on fascism that is fascinating is some people would just see it as a kind of political style and say it doesn't really have any substance to it. It's not really an ideology. And some of my research has been looking at how this really mirrors discussions about populism, but also if you want to see fascism as having some content, it's often seen as being very illiberal, anti-liberal, anti-communist, anti-socialist in its kind of content. And that understanding of fascism in some ways sees it as a kind of extreme form of conservatism, sort of conservatism plus violence or plus the glorification of state violence, the violence of the kind of supporters of that position. And so it's a really lively question about, is Trump a kind of extreme conservative tilting into a kind of fascist if the actions of a second administration kind of warrant that? Or is this just really a fascism, really just a style of politics, a style of kind of extreme performative politics, which can lead into violence as well?